everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I have a little guest over here, my mother Rebecca, and basically today we're just going to be discussing the beginning steps of starting to drive, which is very scary. I can admit myself that I did not like driving to begin with at all. It was this one over here who kind of nudged me to drive, and we're just going to discuss all the tips and tricks that we have figured out over the course of myself learning to drive. This mainly is a video for the parents, but new drivers are totally welcome to stay and watch because I think there is some helpful information in here as well. The biggest thing that I think that you guys should all be aware of is I do have two diagnosed learning disabilities. I have dyslexia and dyscalculia. Now I know dyscalculia is a big word and it seems very weird. You probably haven't heard of it before, but essentially it's just a math learning disability, and believe it or not, there's a lot of parts of driving that do have to do with math skills. So driving was very hard for me, still is very hard for me, and that's another reason why I think this is just a really important video to talk about, because I have like a different perspective than others. The other thing is, if we do have our eyeballs looking this way, it's because there's a computer that is guiding us. Alright, my mom is going to take it away to begin the very beginning steps of driving. Let's hear it.
So I do recommend that your child take a driver's ed class. I know in some states, if you are a certain age, you don't have to take a driver's ed class, but I really think it's important. And you should take a driver's ed class that has a driving component with an instructor. I did prepare the instructor about Jacqueline's learning disabilities. I explained what they were, and I gave them a little bit of information about what might be helpful to her. And I also made it very clear that I did not expect her to come out of the driving instruction being quite at the same level as many of her peers were. And I knew that because I had two sons that had gone through driver's ed, and I knew their level when they were done with driver's ed, and I just knew she wasn't going to be at that level, and that was fine with me, and I wanted to make sure that they knew that it was okay as well. One of the other options that we were given is to be in the back seat during the last time that she was out with an instructor, and you should definitely take that option. I took notes, I listened to the way that the driver instructor gave her directions, and then I was able to be consistent with those instructions when it was me coaching her in the car after the class.
Another thing that I want to tell you is I personally in the state of Maine had to do 70 total hours of driving, but 10 of which had to be nighttime driving. First of all, nighttime driving is my worst enemy. I really dislike it, even now. But basically what I do want to say is it's probably going to take you a lot longer if you are someone with the learning disability learning to drive than your peers, and it is challenging, I will tell you, but it's definitely just necessary to go at your own pace. You do not need to be in your own way, just like let it be however it needs to be.
My first advice to parents is that you purchase one of these signs saying new driver on it.
Yes.
This is really important. Now I have heard some other parents say, I'm not putting this on the car because that is a crutch for my child. They should be able to know how to do this independently, and I'm going to say no way. I felt like other drivers needed to watch out for her when we first started, and that's just fine because she needed to feel comfortable. She needed to have the space between other cars. I needed her to know that she needed to switch, when she was switching lanes, that there weren't very many cars behind her, and that's just fine. And it took 50 hours before I felt comfortable taking that sign off. Yeah. So it's okay to start with a sign, and you should graduate to not having a sign, but know that that's perfectly fine and natural, I think, for children who have disabilities.
Yeah, and this sign is not just for people who do have learning disabilities. Literally, you'll see them all over the place, and truly, it's not a huge deal at all if you need it. I also, as a driver, felt really safe knowing that magnet was on the back of my car, just in case I did slip up. It would be an explanation as to why I may have made that mistake, and not just having angry people behind me honk at me all the time. So that's what I kind of wanted to add in.
I will say that these are magnetic, and some of the cars out there are not metal, so they may not stick. So you may have to make some adjustments to how you
maybe tape or something. I don't know.
Fix this to your car.
Yeah. We're going to talk about speedometers in this little minute or so. When I first started driving, I had no digital speedometer. It was just like a circle with tick marks and numbers, and that was super confusing for me because it looked extremely similar to an analog clock. And when I was driving, I at that point did not know how to read an analog clock, so both of them looked super confusing to me. That's when I realized I need a digital speedometer, and the car didn't have one, but the App Store does have free speedometer apps. And so all I had to do was download the app, click on it, and have like a little phone holder when I went out to drive, that I would just constantly put the app on, and I could visually see the digital speedometer as well as like the one that I never really looked at.
So I'm gonna start by just setting up the environment on the road a little bit for your child with a learning disability. And I didn't realize this, but we should have started with a road that had lines on it. So I started in a residential area right by our house, and there are no lines on the road. So Jacqueline had a very hard time spatially staying on one side of the road. I would go to a place at a time of day that is not very populated or busy, and I would practice on roads that have lines because it will guide your child to be spatially on the correct side of the road and stay on that side of the road.
When she says lines, sometimes there are lines that are just faded, so please make sure the lines are up to date, newly painted, so we can definitely like visually see them. Left and right is a huge difficulty for me even nowadays, but one thing that I did was do little stickers that said L and R, and I put them on my dashboard, so when I was obviously turning the steering wheel, I could just glance down to make sure that I was steering in the correct place.
Okay, next we're talking about giving directions to your child, and as we just heard, left and rights are hard, but I still think she needed to learn left and right. So what I would do is use hand signals, and I would say, we're going to take a left at the next light. So she could see what direction my fingers were going, and she knew the directions, but I wanted her to keep hearing the word left and right. If you don't like that, you can say, I want you to turn right on my side or turn left on your side. That would work. I have heard people say passenger side, driver's side. I think that's a little confusing. So the best we came up with was left hand signals.
Definitely. And adding on to that, my favorite topic, visual cues. This just means that when my mom was instructing me, she would usually say, turn right, obviously, yeah, with like the hand signals, where the green truck is, or pull in right after the gray car. Anything that has like a color match to it was super helpful for me. And I think that's my main tip to all of you parents out there who might be instructing your child.
I would also say it's really helpful, like when you're coming up to like lanes that then split into multiple lanes, and she's not able to track where she's going. I'll be saying, stay in the second lane from left, follow that gray car.
Yeah, definitely.
Another direction that I liked that worked for Jacqueline is, as you can expect, taking a left is difficult. Taking a left with 2 lanes taking a left is even more challenging. So when we first started taking a left, I would start saying, which side are you hugging? What is your landmark you're aiming towards? So when we were on the inside lane, I asked her, where are you headed? And she would say, towards that island. That makes sense. When she was on the outside lane turning left, I'd say, which side are you hugging? And she would say, I'm hugging toward the curb. So I knew ahead of time that she was headed in the right direction. Another tip I would give you is that you have a designated period of time that you're going to go out. Typically, we would go out between 45 minutes and 1 hour. It is very overloading to a child. I think even new drivers in general, whether they have a learning disability or not, it's hard to absorb a lot of information and be in an overloaded sensory state. So I think 1 hour is a really good landmark or time frame to go out. And I learned over time that it was really good to have an objective. So I would say to Jacqueline, today we're going to learn how to take rights on red, and I need you to know everywhere that you need to look before you take a right on red. And so that's what we would do. We would just practice and practice, and she would tell me, I'm looking here, I'm looking here, I'm looking here. Having an objective was helpful, and then the next time we went driving, we could just remind ourselves of the objective we used before and double check that she knew it before we added another skill.
Absolutely. And something that I also want to add is my parents never really expected me to do like what other children were doing at my age. Like some people were really ready to go out and drive consistently and like flee and be free. I was never at that stage. I feel like I'm still not at that stage of like wanting that freedom and always wanting to go out and drive. As I said before, I don't like driving. So there was just a couple routes that I needed to know and that my parents wanted me to know. For example, going to school and back home again. That obviously makes a lot of sense, so I could have that freedom and not have to take the bus. Another thing would be like going to the grocery store. So those are a couple things, and then a side little story is 1 year ago I worked at an ice cream shop for the summertime. This summer I also happened to work at the same ice cream shop, and we were practicing the routes last summer so I could go to my job this upcoming summer and do it on my own. But when I realized I had to go to my first shift, I told my mom, I don't actually remember how to get to my work. And this work, what do you think? It's like 3 miles away or something. It's quite close to my house. I should know. I know in my brain I should know how to get there. I did go to work, obviously last summer, repetitively, and then it just slipped my mind. It's like I've never even been there before. This happens all the time with people who have learning disabilities. They can learn something one day, completely forget it the next, and you as a parent should be aware of this. It's not something horrible, that's not something that's horribly wrong with your child. It's just a part of their learning disability. So yeah, we ended up going out right before my first shift just to do a practice run, and then I was successful for the rest of the summer of how to get there on my own. But it was hard, and I even felt myself, I'm like, why don't I know this? But the real thing was just, it's a part of my learning disability.
And what I would say on that is Jacqueline's about to go off to college, so she won't have a car. So I fully expect that when she comes home in 3 months that we're going to have a driving refresher before she goes out on her own. And that's okay. I'm fine with that because I know that's what she needs.
Absolutely. As we previously discussed, we had an objective to go out and drive, and there was obviously like a reason. But something that I did not mention, but I think will be helpful for you parents out there and even children out there learning to drive, is we actually documented some of these lessons that we did, and I posted them on TikTok. I'll leave my username on the screen, and it's also on my website. My website is mineslikeMine.com. There should be just a little videos tab that you can click on, and there's a section for Jacqueline's driving diaries. That was just another thing because I knew learning to drive was going to be very hard for me. I knew there wasn't a lot of information on the internet, so going into it, I was like, this could be very helpful for others in the future, and even myself if I want to go back and rewatch things.
And
it's an option.
Some of them are quite humorous. So
yeah, there's a lot of funny little mistakes due to my dyslexia and dyscalculia. But thank you so much for sticking around to the end of this video. I really do hope that this is helpful if you are a parent, if you are a student. You've got this no matter who you are, and we are going to be rooting for you over here. Bye, everyone.